before leaving for my house, we had to finish our last class of the day. Fortunately, the session was short. The teacher only reviewed the answers to the midterm and told us he would give us the grades next week. When I saw the answers on the board, I felt myself sinking deeper into my chair. I had made mistakes. I didn't answer exactly what the professor expected, even though my reasoning was valid. The hypothesis I proposed about the boy made sense. The decrease in heart rate and respiratory rate in response to a certain stimulus. I didn't know if that would save me or if my grade would be a disaster. But at that moment, the midterm was the least important thing. When class ended, we left in a group. We didn't talk much on the way. Everyone was lost in their thoughts. The ride home felt endless. My hands were cold and trembling. When we arrived, I tried to take out the keys, but I couldn't get them to fit in the lock. "Let me," said Miguel, gently taking them from me. I let him do it. He opened the door easily, and there it was. Everything. Just as we had left it in the morning. The door was locked with a padlock and internal latch. There were no signs that anyone had forced entry. Daniel was the first to speak. "Maybe they came in through a window or the back door." "There's only one way to find out," said Laura. We went inside. The first room we checked was the living room. Everything was intact, too intact. The same order, the same cleanliness, nothing out of place. Daniel ran up to the second floor. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time and checked the rooms. When he came down, his expression was a mix of confusion and concern. "Everything is fine," he said, as if he couldn't believe it. And then Alejandra broke down in tears. It wasn't a loud cry. It was silent, anguished, as if she were trying to hold it in. I knew why. It wasn't just because of me. It was because she had also received that call. And now we were more scared than ever. Daniel, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "Listen, we need to calm down," he said, his voice firm but calm. "We're letting this affect us too much." "How do you want me to calm down?" I said, still feeling the tremor in my hands. "Nothing makes sense, Daniel. Nothing. I know, but panicking won't help us. The only thing we know for sure is that no one entered the house. Everything is in order." "And what about the calls?" Alejandra asked with a trembling voice. Daniel sighed. "I don't know. But until we understand what's going on, there's something we can do. Don't answer calls from unknown numbers." We all went silent. "None of us will answer," Daniel continued. "No matter the time, no matter how persistent. If it's a number we don't know, we ignore it." No one argued. It was the most reasonable thing to do. When night fell, Mom finally arrived. She looked exhausted, as always after a long day at work. We sat in the living room and I asked her, "Mom, this morning you called me to tell me I forgot my phone at home, but I had it with me." She smiled absent-mindedly. "Oh, yes, it was my mistake. At first, I thought you'd forgotten it, but then I realized I was calling your number and you answered, so I had forgotten my phone." I stared at her. She didn't seem worried at all. I decided to ask her the next thing. "And the calls you made while I was in the midterm?" "Oh, that," she nodded. "I asked my secretary to call you and give you that message because I was in a meeting. I didn't remember you were in midterms. Sorry if I caused you any trouble." That explained at least part of what had happened, but the most important thing was still missing. "Mom, did anyone answer your phone when I called you?" She frowned, clearly confused. "No, I didn't have my phone all day, and as you see, I just got home. But someone answered." She shrugged, brushing it off. "You must have dialed the wrong number. Don't worry, sweetheart. But I'm sure I called yours." Mom sighed and stood up. "I'm exhausted, dear. We'll talk tomorrow, okay?" She went to her room and closed the door. I didn't feel at ease. I ran to my room and checked the call log. There it was, the call to my mom's cell phone, made exactly at 12:00 p.m. It lasted 3:05 minutes. So, what had that been? I grabbed my phone and wrote in the WhatsApp group. I asked my mom about the calls. Some things make sense, but the call that was answered with my voice still doesn't have an explanation. The messages started coming in almost immediately. "Alejandra, that's still the worst. I don't want to think about what that means." "Miguel, let's try to be rational. Maybe it was a line error, like a crossed call or something." "Daniel, I don't know, but so far there's nothing we can do. The only thing we know for sure is that Ayla's thing happens this Thursday at 3:33 a.m. We all went silent for a few minutes, as if processing that information took longer than usual. "Daniel, I think the best thing is for us to stay together. We can tell our families we're meeting to study for midterms. That way, we'll be together Thursday at that time." It seemed like the best option. No one wanted to be alone with these thoughts. We confirmed that we'd stay at Miguel's house, and after some nervous jokes, we disconnected. I lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. This had to be a joke, a horrible joke from someone who had overheard us talking about the creepypasta. Maybe someone manipulated the call. Maybe someone was setting a trap for us. Inside, I wished that were true. Sleep began to take over me. My body relaxed, and my thoughts grew fuzzy. And then I heard it, a voice, my voice, whispering right in my ear. Tuesday, 1:04 p.m. My eyes snapped open. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Was that my mind? Or had I really heard it? The sound had been so clear, so close, so real. I could swear I even felt a faint warm breath on my ear. I shook my head and tried to calm myself down. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, but still, I knew another sleepless night awaited me. This was moving from strange to unbearable, because Daniel was the next one to receive a call from the unknown number. He tried to act like nothing, as if the calls from unknown numbers didn't affect him, but we all saw it. We saw how the subtle tremor at the corner of his lips betrayed his nervousness. We saw how his cold, sweaty hands gave him away, and we saw him turn completely pale when his phone vibrated on the table in the magnolia garden. We looked at each other, tense, but no one said anything. It wasn't necessary. As we had agreed, no one answered, but an unease gnawed at me inside. Even though we were avoiding the unknown calls, that didn't mean we were safe, because my call hadn't been from an unknown number. It had been from my mom's phone. And not only that, I had made the call myself. Had the others noticed, or had their minds blocked it out to avoid panic? I didn't want to mention anything. I didn't want to increase their fear, but I wasn't sure if it was a good idea for them to keep avoiding only the calls from unknown numbers. Classes passed in a strange daze. We were all physically there, but our minds were elsewhere, trapped in the uncertainty of what was going to happen. In the end, I couldn't take it anymore. I skipped the last class and headed to the magnolia garden. I needed to breathe, get away from the routine, and find some calm in the middle of all this. I lay down under the big tree, letting the sounds of nature surround me. I closed my eyes, feeling the cool grass under my hands. For a moment, my mind began to yield to the tiredness, until Tuesday, 1:04 p.m. A whisper. My whisper. It wasn't loud, just a murmur, but it pierced me like a cold dagger. I opened my eyes suddenly, my breath shallow. I sat up immediately, rummaging for my phone in my bag. The lit screen reflected the time, 6:03 p.m. The others must have already gotten out of class. With trembling fingers, I wrote in the WhatsApp group, "See you in the second floor lab." I looked around, still sitting on the grass. No one was there. I never thought I'd come to fear my own voice. We met in the lab, and without much preamble, we decided to go to Miguel's house. Thursday, 3:33 a.m. That was the date and time given to Eerie. That moment would change everything. Miguel lived in a family house that rented out rooms or entire floors. He had the whole third floor to himself, which meant that night we'd have a place just for us. Laura, the only one who seemed not to be on the verge of collapse, took care of bringing plates of snacks and glasses of juices and sodas. I had no idea how she could act so normally. We settled into the living room, trying to do anything to keep our minds occupied. We talked, studied, watched movies, whatever we could to make the hours pass more quickly. I took out my phone and checked the time, 8:12 p.m. There were still 7 hours to go until the moment that would decide everything, and the waiting was the worst. Around 1 a.m., we were all scattered around Miguel's floor. Some were asleep, others pretended to be busy, but in reality, no one could escape the feeling that time was closing in on us. The only one I couldn't find anywhere was Eerie. A bad feeling ran down my back, so I got up and started looking for her. I thought about the bathroom. I knocked on the door. "Eerie, are you there?" Silence. Then a muffled whisper. "Leave me alone." I pressed my forehead against the wood, taking a deep breath. "I'm not going to leave you alone." No response. I tried a silly joke, something nonsensical, something to break the thick air that enveloped us all. A few seconds later, the door opened. Eerie was sitting on the toilet seat, her eyes red, her face covered in tears. I slid down the wall to sit in front of her. "It's going to be okay," I said, even though I had no way of assuring it. "We're together. Whatever happens, we'll face it." She didn't respond. She just looked at me with a vacant expression. I tried to force a laugh, but it sounded more like a tired sigh. "Also, Eerie, you need to be in perfect condition for Tuesday at 1 p.m. Her brows furrowed. "What?" "My day and time. Tuesday, 1:04 p.m. Eerie blinked, and her expression changed. She stood up, left the bathroom, and sat in front of me. She grabbed my hands tightly, squeezed them, and then placed a warm kiss on them. "We're together," she whispered, "no matter what happens." My throat closed. I felt the tears burning in my eyes, but I forced myself to hold them back. Someone had to be strong here. We went back to the living room. Laura was sleeping on the couch, tangled in a blanket that barely covered her feet. Miguel and Daniel were by the window, the pane open and the cigarette smoke escaping into the early morning. We approached them. Miguel looked at me with an eyebrow raised, silently asking if everything was okay. I answered him with a simple, "Yes." He nodded and passed me his cigarette. I had never smoked, but what did it matter now? If something was going to kill me, it wasn't nicotine. Something else was waiting for me. Something with my own voice. The clock read 3:13 a.m. I shook Laura more forcefully than necessary. "Wake up," I murmured, my voice tense. Miguel was serving more coffee in the cups for everyone. I lost count of how many he had already made. 5? Maybe 6. My body was trembling, my neurons buzzing like an angry beehive. I didn't know if it was from the caffeine, the cortisol, or the fear. Laura slowly opened her eyes, frowning. "What's wrong?" "The time." Her eyes opened wide. Without saying anything, she took off the blanket, rubbed her eyes, yawned, stretched, and got up to look for Miguel in the kitchen. Eerie was in the center of the couch, muttering something to herself. She was holding a small object in her hands, clutching it tightly. I approached and asked her what it was. "Don't laugh," she said with a trembling voice. "I would never." She opened her palm and showed me a tiny rosary, the size of a bracelet. I recognized the shape instantly. My family was Catholic, although I had never practiced. I smiled, trying to lighten the atmosphere. If your mom had known a call would make you a believer, she would have made one years ago. Ale let out a brief, faint laugh. It's incredible how in such horrible moments we all become believers, or at least hope to get favors, right? I nodded in understanding and wrapped an arm around her. She closed her eyes and sighed. I looked at my phone. 3:30 a.m. Damn it. 3 minutes. This is going to kill me. Aleja was crying in Daniel's arms, who had already turned off his phone to stop receiving calls from the unknown number. She was squeezing her eyes shut tightly, tears running down her cheeks. 1 minute. My leg moved uncontrollably. Laura, sitting next to me, put her hand on my knee to calm me down, but I couldn't help it. 3:33 a.m. We stayed silent, eyes closed, as if we were waiting for an asteroid to hit us. I counted in my head. 30 seconds. I opened one eye. Nothing. Nothing happened. Aleja took a deep breath. We all did, but I didn't relax. "Let's wait a little longer," I said. "We can't take anything for granted." The minutes became half an hour, then an hour. Nothing. Exhaustion overcame us, and we decided to sleep together in the living room, just in case. At 7 a.m., Aleja woke us all up. She was radiant, despite the dark circles. "Nothing happened. I'm alive," she said, smiling. It was obvious, the most logical thing. Daniel stretched and said confidently, "I told you. We need to find the idiot behind this prank." We all nodded, but I wasn't so sure, because my call had been different. The sound of a ringing phone broke the silence. It was Laura's. She answered without checking the caller ID. "Idiot. Go prank someone else. Ridiculous." She hung up and looked at us with a grimace. The loser prankster called me. Wednesday, 12:08 p.m. The others seemed to relax. Laura was convinced it had all been a bad joke. And most importantly, nothing had happened at 3:33 a.m. They breathed a sigh of relief, but I was still waiting for my call. We left Miguel's house and headed to the university. Classes. More classes. Everyone functioning on half a brain. At the end of the day, we said our goodbyes. Aleja assured us she would be fine. That night, we talked on WhatsApp. Everything was fine. Everything seemed fine. Tuesday came. We were in the cafeteria, having lunch. I was barely paying attention to the conversation. My eyes kept drifting to my phone screen. 2 minutes left. 1:04 p.m. My time. I held my breath as I watched the clock, tracking every second, trapped in that minute that stretched like infinite chewing gum. Time moved. 1:05 p.m. Nothing. I took a deep breath, as if releasing a weight that had been pressing against my chest. I returned to the conversation with my friends. I smiled. I acted normal. Eventually, Miguel and Daniel also received their day and time, but nothing happened to any of us. We never found the prankster, and the whole thing faded into oblivion, or at least for them. Years have passed, but I still think about it. What if it wasn't a joke? What if the day and time were set, just not for that moment? How many Tuesdays at 1:04 p.m. do I have left? Which one will be the last? And my friends, I've lived all this time, hoping I'm wrong.